Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. As the title of this video suggests, I'm doing kind of a series of these, sort of what I'm calling Thailand tales. It's kind of information in the expat sphere about how things were. And by the way, for you old expat hands out there, and maybe some of you don't want to be called old, but for you guys that have been here a long time, even probably longer than me, I'm sure there's many of you watching this channel that have been. You know, if you have any ideas for sort of stories about stuff that went on here in Thailand, sort of in the expat world, things that would have impacted expats, sort of back in the day, as they say, you know, we're all ears. So curious to hear what you have to say in the comments, or feel free to send us an email. But in this video, we're talking about the so-called infinite 30-day stamp. And what are we talking about here? There was a time in Thailand, for those who are unaware, those coming into Thailand under standard immigration procedure, if they're coming from certain countries, mostly Western countries, they can get a 30-day stamp just at the airport. They could get on a plane. You know, it's almost weird to talk about this now because COVID is, the government response to COVID has changed so many of these protocols, especially since the emergency decree of March 2020. But prior to that, somebody, for example, from America could get on a plane, get to Thailand, come to Bangkok, boom, 30-day stamp, stamped in their passport right when they come in. They just got a 30-day stamp. And now, as opposed to back then, there's only a certain number of those you can get. You can only get a certain number of visa. It's called the visa exemption stamp. We've done a number of videos on this. There's only so many of those you can get. Basically, the way I look at it is about 3 a year is kind of where you max out. But back then there was no rule on that. There was actually it was sort of infinite. And I know a number of people that lived in Thailand for a long time. Some that are still here. They're generally in some other kind of non-immigrant status. But yeah, they would just, especially folks that lived up country, oftentimes with a spouse that were near a border, they would just set a shopping, oftentimes it was a shopping deadline to go over to the other side to Laos or to Cambodia, and pick up some things they might not otherwise be able to get where they lived, and then just come back in, and that got usually the husband's status for another 30 days. And you could just continuously do that. There was a time that was feasible, that was possible. That time has come and gone. They first initiated they basically said you can only get 3 of those for every 6 months. It kind of evolved into a dance where you'd get 3, and then some folks would run to an embassy and get a tourist visa, and then use that to come back to basically take another 90 days that would give them the 6 months, and then they'd start over again. They eventually phased that out, and now, again, we're under the emergency decree here right now, so it's kind of a different setup. Currently, actually, an inbound exemption stamp you get 45 days on as opposed to 30. That's to account for the time one has to spend either in the Phuket sandbox, the Samui sandbox, or just in quarantine. So they've kind of taken into account that initial 14-day period. But yeah, there was a time here in Thailand where yes, it was possible. The infinite 30-day stamp was a possibility. I've seen many folks that used it. I've seen a lot of older passports that just have reams of these 30-day stamps in there. Occasionally, folks would run into an immigration officer that didn't really like that after a certain point. But for the most part, it was pretty much common practice, and then they changed the rules on that.